Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event. Are you ready to pop your cork? In the left corner at 6'4", 242 pounds, with a record of 45-0, the undisputed.
Hey, Michael.
Hey, Will.
Hey, how many bottles of wine have you had?
Well, Will, it's not the wine. I'm just so excited about the podcast.
Yeah, I am too. But this is not a boxing match. This is We Know Texas Vino.
So.
Welcome all you Texas wine lovers. You're here with We Know Texas Vino. I'm your host, Will, and we're coming to you from Pedernales Cellars with Julie Culkin. Thank you, Julie, for having us out here.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here.
I've heard a lot of good things from you about y'all. A lot of people always brag about y'all. In fact, we have a lot of the winemakers up in North Texas always come down here and see y'all. And I have been told on multiple occasions by many people that I need to come out here and see y'all. And so on this, my third trip out here is one that you're going to be on now. So
perfect.
I got to go out here. When we walked in, I did see the saddles from the Houston Rodeo that y'all went out there. I love seeing saddles. I mean, I grew up on horses and stuff, so it's nice seeing saddles. So I do look at them and I see, I think my butt's going to hurt a little bit if we rode those. So
those are show saddles.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Yeah, most definitely. So real quick, we're going to touch on social media. So you can find us on Facebook at We Know Texas Vino. You can also find us on our website at weknowtexasvino.wine or even .com. You can find our podcast on any podcasting platforms, and please feel free. Please give us a 5-star rating and give us some feedback. We love what you tell us about our podcast that you love, wineries we should get on, even wine education topics. Let us know what you want, and we will do our best to get it out there. So again, you're listening to We Know Texas Vino. We're on episode 73. I can't believe we're almost at 75. We've been doing this almost now 2 years. Again, we drop an episode every Sunday, or we try to. Somebody was sick and traveling and didn't get to, so. But we're at a beautiful place called Pedernales Cellars. And again, Julie, thank you for having us out here. So sitting and doing a little bit of research about the winery, and there's a lot of rich history on this whole area. So just tell us, where did this come from? How did the family want to just decide to make a winery?
Well, the beginning of Pedernales Cellars is actually Culkin Vineyards, which was planted by our parents in 1995. Mm-hmm. It was a retirement project, which is a crazy thing to do. Never, ever plant a vineyard as a retirement project. But they did it reasonably smart. They had, it was really a long-term friend of my father's who had a vineyard in Red Mountain in Washington State. Okay. So he came down and helped them and said, this is what you need in terms of trellising, and here's how to order plants and all this. So they did have some, in a sense, expert advice that was consulting, and they didn't try to plant too much. That's usually the problem when you have just a couple. They think, we'll plant 6 acres. Never plant 6 acres. That's too many to take care of. So anyway, so they planted, initially I think got 2, and then eventually they got about 4. Anyway, they had no interest in making wine. So they were just growing grapes. And if you will, when they first mentioned it to me, and I was actually living in California at the time, I thought they had gone crazy. They've been in corporate America their whole lives. So, but anyway, they both had grown up on farms, and they were living in Dallas at the time. They decided to do this, and they didn't want to retire in Dallas. Which is understandable. It's, crowded, pollution, traffic jams.
No countrysides.
No country, yeah. So anyway, that is really where the impetus of the project was. And, they planted what you could sell in 1995, which was Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Merlot, and Cabernet Sauvignon. And it gave us a lot of perspective on growing in Texas because the whites did terribly. It's just it's hard to find good whites for the hill country. Yep. And so in terms of the Merlot and the Cabernet Sauvignon was happy as a plant, but it was very vegetal, right? It was hard to get it to concentrate on the fruit. And so the Merlot was the only one I would say you really could say, there could be a commercial success in doing Merlot. So, but anyway, we found this out over a period of a decade, because it was only a decade later that my brother and I decided to form Pedernales Cellars. Okay. And so our first vintage was 2006. And it was basically, it was everything from Culkin Vineyards made into what is our first wine, which is Family Reserve, which we still make, though it doesn't all come from Culkin Vineyards. Anyway, and then, the other thing that had evolved at that point is, when my parents were selling grapes in the 90s, there were about 3 wineries out here, right?
Yep.
By the time the 2000s, there were more people showing interest, and we had been able to observe the Texas wine industry for a while, and we decided, no, we're going to try to specialize. Don't try to be everything to all people. We know not to plant more Cab, no more Merlot, and so we bet on Tempranillo. And so about 50% of Colcan Vineyards, so we expanded the vineyard at the point we started the winery. About 50% of Colcan Vineyards is Tempranillo.
Okay.
So, and on the white side, we decided to source from the High Plains, because that was already sort of a thing to do. And we decided on Viognier. There was a fair amount of Viognier planted even by the mid 2000s or whatever, the knots, just to find that first decade. So anyway, and then, we filled out the program with what would be the basis for our GSM. So our Rhone style, we grow Mourvedre and Grenache. And then we did plant some Albarino. We did try whites again, picking one that does seem to do better in Texas. But anyway, and then we planted a whole bunch of Portuguese varieties. And the idea originally was we were going to make port, right? Anyway, in the long run, we discovered that these grapes are way too good to be pouring brandy over.
Right.
So we stopped doing that. And we developed actually a whole line of wines around the Portuguese varieties. We have a separate club for wines that are based mostly on those grapes. And particularly on Touriga Nacional, which is the premier grape of Portugal by some standards. It's a pain in the butt to grow, I will tell you that, which we didn't know until we were growing it, because it doesn't like to be trained. For years, it puts out these tiny clusters, like 10 berries, 7 berries. It takes forever to clear a plant with Touriga.
So tiny berries. So when did you actually get a good cluster then to actually to make wine out of it?
Well, no, you can make wine out of, berry by berry. It's just a pain in the butt to pick.
Okay.
So we made wine with it. It's just, the thing about Touriga Nacional, and this is why, it is so prized, is that it is these small berries with very thick skins.
Okay.
So you're talking a lot of extraction and a lot of structure.
Right.
It's not a fruity grape, but it is structurally, it's wonderful.
So repeat that name of that varietal again.
Touriga Nacional.
Okay, so I've actually, as you said that, I remember there's another vineyard actually planting that themselves.
Yeah. No, we're not the only one, but
this is the second time I've heard it since I've been down here. So Portree is actually doing it also.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that.
And so that's the second time I've heard this. Now I have to do a little bit more research on this to understand this grape, this varietal. So, okay. Sorry, continue.
It's from the Douro Valley. It is used in port production, but obviously the longest time, the Portuguese had no idea what were in their vineyards, and they just would, harvest it all and send it to the port houses to be turned into port. You see some strict up to Touriga Nacional out of Portugal, but still many of their wines are blends. So.
Interesting.
And we use it in blends for the most part. We have done 100% Touriga Nacional.
How did that do?
It did pretty well. It was, it was all from Colcan Vineyards. Obviously, when you have your own vineyard, you can baby the grapes. You don't necessarily have to make money on it.
Right.
Because it's just, for us, it's 2 family-owned businesses, and so you're just sort of trading off of each other.
Right.
So. Anyway, but it was good, and it'll last forever.
Interesting. That's interesting. I've never heard of it, and that makes me want to find some and try it and see what it tastes like.
You should. Mm-hmm.
So, how did y'all? I know we were at the Pedernales River right here where we were at, but did y'all settle down on that name right away, or is it some variations went around until you finally settled on that name?
We really never. One of the things is because we have the last name Colcan, which no one can spell, so we weren't going to use our name. But we also didn't want to do anything that would be too personal to the family. We always wanted it to be like someone else could own this and could represent it. And there was a Pedernales winery at some point way back, and we could see that, the name is obviously used quite a bit since it is the major river that goes through the area. Anyway, but we played with other things and didn't like any of them. As I said, we wanted a name that, was more nearly like represented the area.
Right.
And so it is also nice that, Pedernales is flint. It means, the stone flint.
Right.
And that forms the basis of our branding as well. Sort of just, again, to point to the local environment. And if you look at our logo, it's a grape leaf and then a set of arrowheads is the basis of it. And as we were developing both this property and the Colca Vineyards and expanding it, we found arrowheads. And so that sort of
that was the next part I was fixing to go off to.
Yeah, no, that sort of spontaneity of that find was like, okay, no, we'll land on that and we'll stick with that.
So when you find those arrowheads, did y'all have people come out here and actually do some archaeology to find out if there's maybe a settlement that was out here? Because usually when you find a large amount of arrowheads like that, usually there's an archaeologist site that you can dig up and find an old campsite somewhere by.
Well, interesting. I mean, we found one at each property. So is it like we found enough to justify bringing someone out and looking for more? So
I think as a kid, looking for an arrowhead and finding a full arrowhead was like finding gold.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Very rare. Yeah, it's very rare. And just to sit there and just to imagine them sitting there chipping away at that flint to make that arrowhead. So it's just amazing stories. So one of the biggest things that I see about a lot of the wineries we've been to already so far in the Hill Country is generational family involvement. I mean, it's just amazing how many generations you can get your family involved with it. Because nowadays we got a lot of young kids that don't want to be part of the family businesses. And it's sad because when they're not part of that, then it actually leaves, the family history leaves with that family when they start passing away. And I really do love that multiple wineries we've been to so far has their kids that got involved with it. And I really love that y'all do that. So how many family members you actually got involved with this whole winemaking? Well,
obviously these are my parents, and then David and I, who own Pedernales Cellars. And between us, we have 5 kids. Mm-hmm. So they've all been, all have harvested, all, participated in sorting. And my older daughter has actually worked in the tasting room for several years when she's at university now. Mm-hmm. She's at UT. But yeah, they've all been involved. To some extent, their involvement is like, how much do they want pocket money? Right. So,
my parents own a vineyard, and they, want me to work at it, they would tell me either you work it or you get a spanking.
It gets harder when they're teenagers. So
especially when cell phones out now,
Yeah. No, I think, the thing is harvesting, for example. It's 6 a.m. in That's August.
Yeah. 6 a.m. is still like 90 degrees outside, you know. You know what? Actually, with the weather we got going on right now, it may not be hot, come August.
Well, it's a little early to be predicting that.
I'm really hoping it would be a very mild summer.
It would be nice after last year.
Yeah, last year was death.
Yeah, no, that was a tough, and it started in June. So
yeah, it did. In fact, I remember working at a winery, and we're sitting down there, and we're waiting for the weekend folks to come in for the concerts and stuff, and no one was showing up. We're like, where are the people at? And it's just like, at 7 o'clock when the concert starts, it's too hot for them to be out there, and they start showing up at 8, 9 o'clock. Well, the concert's now over.
Right.
So, yeah, I definitely get that. And I've gone out there and worked in the vineyard also, like right now, in fact, what was it? A couple of weeks ago, I worked out there, and it was like 90 degrees with, like a 40% humidity. Mm-hmm. And man, I was just sweating and it was just crazy.
Yeah, no, it's very humid right now.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, we prefer these conditions to what we had last year.
Oh, most definitely. So we all know that rain is good and bad at the exact same time. So the vines need the rain, but the vines don't need the rain. So can you explain why that's like that? How can I say it? Can you explain that? Explain why grapes need rain but don't need rain?
Right. Yeah. And one way to think about this is to think about some of the most perfect places to grow grapes, like the Mediterranean or California. And they have, Mediterranean climate is wet during the winter, dry and warm during the summer. And that is really sort of the perfect situation for grapes. Because you want the plant to be able to establish itself, to be able to put out, it takes a lot of energy to draw the sugars from the roots every season, to have bud break and everything. And so if it doesn't have water, it's not getting nutrients, it's not, able to photosynthesize. So all that time you want that water. But at some point, and basically around veraison, which is when the red grapes turn from green to red. You really want the rain to stop, because then the sugar start accumulating, and the fact of the matter is that it becomes a good place for mold to start growing.
Right.
And so you do not want you then want it to be hot dry or warm dry or whatever, dry. And definitely during harvest, you do not want rain, because you're if it's just like the day before you wanted to harvest, the grapes get filled with water, and so they're more diluted.
Right.
And then again, you then have to wait for them to dry out, giving more time again for mold. So you definitely want rain seasonally, and Texas we have, generally speaking, during like the July, August period, which is sort of the last ripening, it's usually dry, which is nice. But we do have problems like in the high plains. They'll start having their storms if the season starts dragging out. And then we have problems here. It's more nearly with hail. The hail season in the hill country is just very ill-timed. So it's just after bud break, and it's just the plant is extremely vulnerable.
Right.
So
I was telling some people about harvest time and grapes and stuff that rain is actually good during the early growing, but it's bad for the late growing. And the best way I could describe it to people, because sometimes they don't quite understand what I mean by that, is a grape, when it doesn't get water, it stresses out, it swells up, it holds all that sugar in. And then when it rains, it's like letting a big sigh of relief out. It just releases everything out. And they look at me like I had a couple of heads here. And I said, they look at me like that don't make sense. And I was like, well, think about it this way. When you don't drink a lot of water, your body starts retaining water, right? And they're like, yeah. And I said, when you drink water, your body starts releasing that water. Is that correct? They said, well, yeah, grapes is the exact same way. And when I tell them that and put that in that perspective, they start understanding. And now they understand during harvest why it's important to harvest while it's still hot. And I hate to say it, but sometimes we have to harvest in the middle of the day, which is not good sometimes. So are y'all 100% estate, or do y'all get some stuff from elsewhere?
No, we've never been 100% estate, and you're just not big enough for the production. And also, we get all our white grapes at this point from the high plains, so it's necessary part of our wine program to be sourcing from the high plains. So it's about, right now, it's still, we've had to replant Colca vineyards recently. As far as we can tell, the vines we brought in 2007 had a viral load. And it just meant they basically had early senescence. They just, started shutting down after whatever that was, about 13 years. So anyway, so we had to do all the replanting. So right now we're getting more than average. Usually we're about 25% estate and 75% sourced fruit. So, but this year there'll be more from the high plains still. So, I mean, the nice thing about replanting was that we got to sort of revisit, what's in the vineyard, and we did plant some new things. As we found that we really like working with Graciano to deal with the fact that Tempranillo is very acid challenged, and Graciano has lots of acid, so blending it in. We also planted Petite Syrah. We found we really like. Yes, it's yummy. It's got beautiful color.
Sorry, did I say that out loud?
Yeah. So, and then Alicante Boucher. Again,
that's a new one coming into Texas. There's a lot of people doing that now.
Yeah, it's a good grape.
It's a very hardy grape for Texas also.
Yeah. And then the odd one is Terral de Go.
And that's a new one coming in also.
Yeah. The interesting thing about Terral de Go, I mean, there's two things. One is sort of odd that it does well here, right? Because it's really from a coolish. It's still warm in the Alto Adige area in northern Italy, but that being it being from Italy, I mean the Italians, everyone had their local grapes, and so the fact is no one probably ever bothered to take it to southern Italy to see if it did well, right? So and then the other interesting thing about it is that it's one of the few grapes in Texas we can get sort of a jammy flavor to, because that's just harder to get with our warmer weather. We just can't let the grapes sit out and basically leach acidity to get them to the point that we're jammy. Right. So. Yeah.
I remember the first time I got introduced to Terral. I couldn't enunciate it. I looked at it. It looked like Talladega. I said Talladega Nights. Everybody laughed about it. I poured my glass of wine. And as my journey has kept going, I've tried it and I've really come to really like it. It's definitely a unique flavor and taste than any other thing that I've drank so far. And I do like it. And in fact, actually the one that I drink right now is very jammy on it. I really love that taste. And I love introducing it to people who've never heard of it before. And they're like, oh, I'm Tempranillo, I'm Cab Sauv, I'm Petite Syrah, Merlot. And I'm like, well, you need to try Toronto. Try Tannat. And I give it to them and they're like, oh, or actually what I would do is I won't even tell them what it is. And I'll pour it for them. And they're like, oh, this is good. What is this? A Tempranillo, Merlot? Like, no, this is Toronto. A what?
Exactly.
And I like to do that because I've talked about this multiple times before. Trying new wines, getting out of your comfort zone, you'll find something else that you like. And us being in the industry, we always want to try something new, to bring something in to show everybody else, hey, Texas can do this, and showcase what we can do, So I'm always fascinated when I hear about new varietals, like we heard Fiano. Never. In fact, it was kind of funny because we were over at Portree and she poured us her Fiano, and I was like, "Oh, this is really good. What varietal is this?" And she goes, "Fiano," and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, okay." I've never heard of it before. So, and then Sandy Rhodes has got one. I can't even remember what it's called. It starts with a P. Don't even give me try to enunciate it. I can't even do it. So there's a lot of new stuff out there. And this other one I hear that I'm not even going to try to enunciate it that you just mentioned. It's another new one that I want to try. I want to see what it tastes like. So I love that Texas is being adventurous, trying new things to see what we can grow, because I know there's some stuff that can grow here that California can't grow. And I want to keep that progress going. So.
Well, California is over time, regions become sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, right? They grew many more things. And I think this pendulum is actually swinging back the other way, but they became so well known for Chardonnay and Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon that they pulled out acreage of other things. And anyway, so, in Texas, because, I don't think we'll ever have a signature grape. We're too big, too diverse.
I mean, people will argue with that. Will say Tempranillo is our signature grape. Tempranillo
does well in all the major growing areas, so it has that advantage.
Yes.
So, and it's really, the reason for Tempranillo is the fact that we have a short growing season, and Tempranillo, as the little early one, is fine with that. Yeah. And which is one of the reasons it does grow in so many different places. But the fact of the matter, we're not going to get pinned into a single grape at all. And I think it would be a mistake, honestly speaking. So, and yes, once you're not doing the things that people know the most, Pinot Noir or Cabernet Sauvignon, then why not Fiano? Why not Terral de Go? Because you're going to have to do education anyway. So, it was even 12 years ago. I can remember distinctly 12 years ago, I would be at a festival and say, there's someone coming up and say, "Hey, can I have some of your cab?" I say, "I don't have any cab. I have Tempranillo." And they're like, "What is that?" So that's not that long ago. So
let me see if I can find that name for you right quick. So one of the things that I've noticed really about y'all's website and also other places I've found y'all are like doing a lot of sustainability here, some regenerative growing techniques. Kind of go into detail about that.
Well, we obviously compost from we press off the grapes. We compost, great tea using the skins. We have a sort of, it's a natural cover crop. We're not planting anything, but it's good for the soils. It's good for the plants. The thing about vineyards is, they are a monoculture. And so you're trying to do anything to increase the biodiversity in the area. Right. So, anyway, we have homes for purple martins, and they're a natural predator for the glassy-winged sharpshooter, which spreads Pierce's disease. So, all of these things are very deliberate. Yeah. We do rainwater collection at the winery, and we use it for it's really the landscape irrigation. We're not trying to treat it and use it in the winery, right. But all these things are incremental. We're in the process of redoing all our labeling so we can get rid of the capsule. It's also a chance to just do a sort of brand refresh in general. Right. But we're talking about moving to a lighter weight bottle. Okay. Because that obviously decreases the amount of energy that's being used to transport, to make the bottles, et cetera. So, all these things, sustainability is always about these small things, but the incremental things make a big difference.
Right. And that's interesting. I've never heard of anybody using lighter bottles.
Oh yeah, no, that's a big thing. There is a reviewer, I think he's out in California, and every single wine he reviews, he says whether he thinks the bottle's too heavy.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's a little annoying, as the winery that they're sitting there quibbling, and it's like, is that the only thing they're going to remember from the review is how heavy the bottle was?
The wine was really, really good, but that bottle was like 500 pounds, and I couldn't even pick it up to pour it. Well,
I have to admit, and again, I think the pendulum has swung against that. There were for a while, Napa cabs in bottles that, I have relatively small hands. I could not pick up with one hand and actually pour because it's so heavy.
Yeah, and there are actually some bottles out there, even for me, that I can't get my hand around. And I'm like, are you? Why do we have to have such a big bottle? And that's not a Magnum bottle. Okay, it was a regular 750 milliliter bottle. Why do you have to have such a big bottle?
At one point, it was associated with prestige, and again, I think the pendulum is swung the other way because people are more concerned about sustainability.
I think I'm going to bottle my wine into the heaviest bottle I can find and send it to him.
Oh, yeah, you should. I'll look. I don't want to give the wrong name certainly on the podcast, but right. I can look that up quickly.
Okay. So I did look up that other varietal I was telling you. I'm not even going to attempt it, but there's the name of it right there.
Okay. Oh, Prieto Picudo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Sandy Rose is actually growing that.
Okay.
And I actually got to try some last week, and I'm not going to lie, it was pretty great. And I looked it up on their website, and it's only members only. So I may have to go over there and convince myself to become a member just so I can get a bottle.
I suspect they're not making a whole lot for probably. I haven't talked to them about it, but very often with it, you plant an acre, right, and you're really sort of experimenting to see. Because I know even when we planted the Tempranillo, Dave was on the phone calling everyone he knew who was growing it and said, "Well, how is it?" Right. Obviously, he didn't reach a lot of people who were growing Touriga Nacional because we didn't find out about that until we planted it. But yeah, that collective knowledge is very helpful for everyone. Yeah. So
yeah, I said a while ago, I really love that the vineyard owners and winemakers are experimenting with new grapes, because there are how many, like 1,300, 3,000, something like that, 10,000 varietals of grapes out there.
Oh, it depends on who you ask. Italy, I think Italy is documented like 1,500, but they think there's like 6,000 or something.
Yeah.
So, but very often you find out, something they thought was the same variety is actually two different varieties. Right. So
that's where we talk about Syrah and Shiraz.
Well, no one knows why they call it Shiraz.
There's so many stories that I've been told about that that Shiraz actually was grown in Australia first, and then Syrah was been migrated down there, and it kind of like intertwined in each other, and they just called it the same thing. And then I've heard that Syrah was actually brought over to Australia, and then they started growing down there, and they couldn't say Syrah properly, so they called it Shiraz. Who knows what the story is? That's where we got to build a time machine and go back to find out, and then correct them and come back forward.
Yeah, there's probably some. Who knows? Someone wrote it down wrong.
Oh yeah, most definitely. You know what? An H could turn to a Z.
Exactly.
So here, I've read a lot about y'all's, a lot of innovations that you got going on here. What are your innovations that you're currently doing right now that just helps improve everything you're doing, from your winemaking to your experience here into the tasting room?
Well, that's a big question.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I think, I don't know if I could say one thing that we're doing. We've been on a continuous, if you will, remodel of everything since the pandemic, because that was sort of the discovery. It's like, you have a tasting room and it's open. We were open 361 days a year, right? So you can't really do any changes, or it's difficult.
Right.
And so suddenly we were closed for months at a time. We were like, okay, get the ladders out. And we did huge remodel inside this building. This room has been completely changed that we're sitting in, which is the library, or we call it the library. So, and this just continues. We just redid the deck. We're going to redo the road. So, all of those, they moved the lab in the production facility. So it's on the same levels where we're bringing in the grapes.
Right.
So it's just more efficient. So it's just, you're continuously changing things to make the operation work better and take advantage of the facilities that you have.
Right. And you got to always keep moving forward, because the minute you stop moving forward, that's where you stop making the good stuff. That's where you stop making the good wines, and you start having people not coming out as much. Because I mean, I know y'all have won multiple awards. I mean, I've seen, in fact, like I said at the very beginning here, y'all have had the saddles out there, and so it's just amazing. When you get ready to, I'm sorry, my brain kind of stopped for a second and then just started up again. So what are your favorite grapes that you love to make wine out of? I mean, we buy what's available sometimes to make, but what is your favorite one? What is the one grape that you'll always get, that you always love to make wine out of?
Well, okay, I mean,
it's like asking which was your favorite kid.
I know. And we usually answer that question like we have, we like all our children. And there's, it's sort of funny. I used to be a graphic designer, and and so I always, when someone asks, what's your favorite color, I'm like, well, it depends what it's on.
Exactly. Yeah.
There are certain things I don't want bright red.
Right.
No, I mean, obviously we spend a lot of time with Viognier and Tempranillo. So to some extent, I always have to say that. We do. When you have those benchmark grapes that you're working with, sometimes you're like, I don't want to go to another event with Viognier. I want to do something else. And then I think I'd actually going to go to the opposite way and answer this in the opposite way. What has been amazing in our journey in the Texas wine industry is how many varieties we can now source and experiment with, because that was not the case.
Yeah.
When we got started, it's just, and it was also, it's like, all the grapes, if you wanted Texas grapes, they good, bad, and different, right? They cost the same amount, right? And now you can really source and say, no, I want to take that. I don't want to take that. With the problems with the dicamba drift in the high plains, we have changed some of our sourcing to places that are less affected by that.
Right.
So there's a lot of factors that come into.
So that drift that you just talked about, that's a really hot topic right now.
It's a tough one.
Are you able to talk about it?
Well, I mean, we don't have, we're not party to, any of the legal maneuvers, part of, it's not really an issue in the hill country. And certainly Colcan Vineyards is so isolated that it's not, it's really a problem in the high plains where there is so much wind, in addition to so much cotton.
Right.
So, I don't think I can add anything. I just, there are people who deny that the effect is there. And it's like, no, it's really quite remarkable what happens to the plants. And it's actually changed. One of the varieties that, people are still discovering more about it. One of the varieties that we were sourcing quite regularly was Vermentino, but seemingly Vermentino is very highly affected by it. And so suddenly there was no more Vermentino, right? And so it's, and then this is true in general. I mean, the sourcing changes every single year. You're having to react. I was looking, actually, I'm on the Economic Development Commission for Gillespie County. And one of the reports that the executive director pulls every year is all the G permits and everything. And he gave the total of how many gallons were being produced in the hill country. And it varies by 100,000, right? From year to year. And he was like, well, why is it down 100,000, from 22 to 23? And I said, well, 23 was a very difficult vintage. And so it just meant that a lot of fruit just had to be discarded because it just wasn't good by the end. And so, to someone who is dealing in widgets, that makes no sense. That's not a chartable path. Right. But that is the reality of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fortunate thing that's going on. I mean, I know that there are a couple of wineries who are involved with that, and I won't say their names. It's a big ordeal up there, and I definitely understand it, because that not only affects their livelihood, but it affects everybody else's livelihood who is up there working with them and help maintain the vineyards and stuff like that. And so, that's something we got to get out there and look. In fact, actually, I will probably put a link to it on our Facebook page, because there's actually a petition going around right now about it. So I'm actually put a post about that on our Facebook page later today about that. I'm glad you brought that up. So, Julie, you've got an amazing place here. Absolutely gorgeous place here. So tell us about your wine club memberships here, because I know every wine club's got a wine club membership, and I know y'all's got a little special wine club membership.
Yeah, we have. No, I mean, we have, I would say the Pedernales Cellars wine club, it is 4 shipments a year, and it has a 3, 6, and 12 level, all named after the fact that we have fabulous views. So they're names like Vista and Hilltop and Panorama.
Right.
So we just introduced, this is the second summer we're actually doing a 5th shipment where it's all white wine.
Okay.
It's an opt-in. It's not, it's not automatically shipped to you, but we just, for years people ask, well, why don't you do, a white wine? And it's just, because we do have red wine, and then we have,
right.
A mix. And I was like, well, we have a lot more red wine than white wine. But anyway, we do have that. And then in addition to that club, we have the Kolken Osterberg, or KO. We most refer to it as KO because Kolken Osterberg is a mouthful. Anyway, it is based on the Triga Nacional. It was that was really the impetus for doing it. We did it. The first vintage was in 2012. It's one wine, a red wine. And it is released once a year, and you get either 6 or 12 bottles. And we call it the Collectors Club. It's an allocation club, so you pay in advance and then you have your release. And anyway, we will be releasing the 2022 in October, which is when the release is.
Okay.
And the fun about KO is that normally when you go to a winery and you do a tasting, you taste their current releases, right? Or some version of it. But when we do a KO event, it's always the multiple older vintages and newer vintages. So it's a chance to see how the wines are aging. And there's just a lot of surprises. We do our own blind tasting of all the wines every year to see where they are, because there's the 2013 is still going very strong, and that the 2015 is we finally said nope, it's done, and just that was that.
I mean, sometimes it happens, Yeah. That is actually really cool. So that's I saw about your wine club, and I thought that was really cool that y'all do that, because you got to have that little something special for people, and that's pretty awesome that y'all do that.
Yeah, it's a nice size too. It's a smaller wine club. And so we can have much more intimate events and really, interact much more. So
interesting. Okay. Well, Julie, as we're coming up to the end of the first half of this podcast here, is there anything that you want to talk about that I didn't touch about? Something you want to talk about from your heart, about your winery, about your family, about this industry? Is there anything we didn't touch you want to talk about? Well,
it is an industry in constant evolution, and it has been an amazing journey. Just when I think about what it was like back in 1995, which in the wine industry terms was not very long ago. Yeah. But sometimes I tell people, it's like, no. It was nothing like that. Those choices weren't there because, the infrastructure wasn't there. The knowledge wasn't there. And so it's been huge. In fact, something came up interesting, again, part of the infrastructure, something that came up this morning at the meeting I was in is the existence of the the Texas Tech certificate program in enology. The ED was talking to someone and they said, yeah, there is someone who has that certificate in almost every winery in the Hill Country. And they turned to me and I was like, oh yeah. Our winemaker and our previous winemaker both got their certificate there.
Nice.
And so that's just an educational component, right? Of what makes it possible to have a continuously rejuvenated industry. So,
that's a good topic you just brought up there. That Texas Tech Enology and Viticulture certificate. So, you said almost everybody in these wineries here in the Hill Country has one. How many winemakers don't have a certificate? That no education, they've just been doing it on their own.
I really can't speak to that. That's not something we have polls on. Who here is doing this without any knowledge?
Who's the genius here without the certificates?
Well, winemaking is a mix of chemistry, right? Which really, that's where having the schooling makes it a big difference. Yeah. And then obviously an enormous amount of experience. And so I would think it would only be some of the smaller ones at this point. Most of them, when I can just rattle through my head, I know they have a professional winemaker. And that was, when we first started, Dave was the winemaker, and he actually did UC Davis. He did their certificate program. And I know when Paul Bonarigo Jr. took over for Messina Hoff, that was a big thing, is that, part of their transition as a family was that, they spent several years just sort of doing that transition. And part of it was that he got the certificate. And I think he did UC Davis as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but previously Paul Bonarigo was in the Marines. So completely different.
Oh yeah. I got to talk to Paul over at Twigga, and he's definitely a interesting man. Yeah. I can't, that was junior I was talking to. I didn't talk to senior. So
they're both.
I would like to get them both at a table at the same time and see what happens.
Yeah, that could be a very interesting discussion actually.
Oh, so Julie, where can our listeners find y'all at? Online and also in person?
Well, obviously in person. We're in Stonewall. Mm-hmm. So, it's we're a little bit off the beaten path, but this is why we have such a great view, as we sort of get up and can look down into the Pedernales River Valley. So you just if you're coming into Stonewall from, let's say, Austin, mm-hmm. Along 290, you turn left and you go about 1.5 miles and you'll see our big sign. So online, we're at, Pedernales Cellars, and then you have to spell it Pedernales Cellars, Cellars. I hate giving my email on phone. So, .com.
Hey, you thought about getting the domain pdc.com?
No, we haven't. No.
I mean, there you go. There's an email address for you right there.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting. As I say, even saying Cellars, you have to say Cellars because someone might think you mean Cellars, Cellers.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. So, well, Julie, what we're going to do, we're going to step away for just a moment. And the next segment we have here, we're going to do some education. Mm-hmm. And the topic is going to be about the importance of racking wine. And again, we're just going to do like a little 10, 15 minute thing on it. It doesn't have to go in like full details about filtering and stuff like that, but why is it important to re-rack wines? Well,
I mean, part of it is that you do want to get what happens, you have your fermentation, mm-hmm. and you do some degree of racking just to get once you get it out of whatever you fermented in. Right. But there's continues to be solid matter that's going to fall in, let's say we're doing it in a barrel, because it's most likely if it's a red wine. And those lees, so the dead yeast cells, and all this solid matter will continue to fall. You probably don't want all that contact with lees in most styles of red wine. Right. And so you want to get back off of that. Right. And so you move wine from one barrel to another barrel, then you clean out the first barrel. So you've gotten rid of that matter. The advantage of this in the long run is essentially it's gravity clarification. Mm-hmm. It means that by the time you're getting to the point where you're going to put the wine in a bottle, you don't need to use as many filtering and fining agents like bentonite or egg whites or there's even like things made on fish gills. I mean, there's a whole bunch of isinglass. So there's a whole bunch of them.
You said fish scales?
It's I think it's from their gills. I'd have to look this up. Don't.
Oh no, I'll look it up. You don't have to. I'll look that up because now, when I was told that for refining they used egg whites, and when they said that, I'm like, okay, so you're putting raw eggs into my wine and expect me to drink that?
Well, it comes right out. I mean, that's actually this whole deal of having the ingredients on wine. There are many things you use in winemaking that don't end up in the final product.
Right. Yes.
But it is, in the case of if you want vegan wine, you can't be using the egg whites. Right. Or I think it's casein. There's a milk-based product. You can't use that one either. Yeah. So there are vegetable-based products as well that you can use. So
it's just fascinating that I want to know who woke up one day and said, you know what? I'm going to take some egg whites and I'm going to drop it in here and I'm going to use it for refining.
I bet you it's historical. I bet it's been used for hundreds of years.
It probably was. But again, someone had to wake up and say, you know what? I'm going to use some egg whites today. I don't have any bentonite or I don't have any clay or whatever. And I'm just going to use egg whites to see what happens. I got a lot of chicken eggs sitting right over here. And I bet they made a lot of creme brulees right afterwards.
I know. Yeah. So anyway, doing the racking off the wines basically allows you to gravity clarify the wines. It obviously takes more time and more labor. So in effect, it is more expensive. Right. So if you're looking at, a large volume, they're not going to do it that way. Right. If you're looking at a Kendall Jackson that we usually talked about their Chardonnay, but if you're looking at a line like that, they're using the agents, not sitting around moving wine from place to place.
Right. Awesome. Well, again, Julie, thank you very much for having us out here. Real quick, I want to hit our sponsors. We got Texas Wine Lover app, which I know you're on there. Great little source of finding wineries. I tell everybody that there's 900 wineries in Texas, and there's no way you're going to be able to find them all sometimes because a lot of them don't have the big blue signs yet. And so this is a great way to find it. Plus you can find out, if there's places to eat there, if they accept dogs, every little kind of detail you want to filter out, you can find that on there. So Texas Wine Lover app is a really great one. And then one of my favorite ones is also Fly with Wine. Have you heard of them?
No, I haven't heard of them.
So let's say you're going to Europe. You're going to drink some wine and you want to bring some wine back. Well, your choices are to ship by UPS, FedEx, or DHL. Well, you got to wait at least a month to get it, right? Well, with Fly with Wine, it's a suitcase that's padded inside. We can put your bottles inside of it and you can check it in for if not cheaper than the cost of shipping it. And then when you land back to the airport, you can open your bottle up right there and drink it going home. Okay, maybe not drinking and driving, but at least you can have it right there for you. So you can drink it that night. So that's one of our sponsors. So we really enjoyed them as well. So now as we come to the close of this podcast, and again, thank you again for having us out here. We're going to do some wine quotes. So we love doing wine quotes. It just ends everything with a great smile, So I got two really great ones here for you. I hope you really like them. So the first one is, I am not self-medicating myself with wine. The tasting room manager wrote me a prescription. Well, he actually called it a receipt. And the last one is called procrastinate drinking. When I heard this one, I had to write this one down. So procrastinate drinking. It's the art of drinking wine instead of doing something else you should be doing.
Exactly.
So again, thank you, Julie, for having us out here. This is Will with We Know Texas Vino, and cheers.
Thanks.